Hello everyone, and welcome back to Teen Innovators powered by NGT 360. My name is Vaidehi, and in today's episode, we will be discussing the importance of building a strong customer base and how to identify your target audience. Before we start, our hearts go out to those affected by the recent hurricanes in Florida. It's incredible to see our community's strength as we rebuild and move forward together. We have since then bounced back stronger than ever and are so excited to finally get started with NGT 360's 10th season. We are glad to announce that the season will be commencing on December 14th with the season kickoff. Glad to see the strength of our community here in Tampa Bay. So here with us today, we have Scott Vejdani, Senior Director at Epsilon and a mentor with all of us here at NGT 360. Scott has played a crucial role in shaping the minds of hundreds of students who have gone through this program and has worked tirelessly to help us all integrate into the Tampa Bay business community. Hi Scott, how are you today?
How's it going? I think we need to call out the horse in the room, or horses in the room, before we begin. So first off, thanks for inviting me to the podcast. It's an honor to be here. We are at a probably very different location that you probably typically see with the podcast episodes. We are at Tara Murphy's farm. Tara is a board member and very good friend of both Robin and I for NGT. This little guy here is Edison, who's going to join us and maybe take some questions as well too. But we thought we'd mix it up this time around and just have a different little bit of scenery, and we couldn't resist being with the horses. So thanks for inviting me on. Yes, I'm a senior director with strategic consultant with Epsilon. Really, my role is focused more on organizational change management. And so what I do is I work with Fortune 500 companies, I work with their marketing departments, and helping them through big transformational changes. So say a marketing department wants to redesign their loyalty program, or they want to redesign their organization. What I'll do is I'll come in and help them with their processes, end user processes. So I have a Green Belt, Lean Six Sigma. We do change management, we do stakeholder management, communications, org design. We help them really transition from where they are now to where they want to go. I got involved with NGT, this is my 5th year with the program. I was a volunteer when I started and signed up through the company I was with at the time, and they were looking for volunteers to help with doing the pitches, and I fully enjoyed it. I wasn't able to actually provide any feedback, which was killing me because I loved the ideas that the students had, but the judges at the time are the ones that had to provide the feedback. And fell in love with it, and then came on next year as a mentor, and have just been so appreciative and so impressed with the level of the students have brought and how well they've done. Even though yes, I've mentored them a lot as well, I think I've learned so much from them throughout the process. So again, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, of course, and we're really excited to have you too. I mean, having a mentor really talk us through what today's topic is, which is like finding the target audience. You know, you've had a lot of experience of working with students, and so it's really cool to kind of get your perspective on it rather than like, you know, what does a student think? So thank you for being here with us. So the first question I want to ask you, what are some initial challenges that you encountered when trying to narrow down ideal audiences for your businesses? And then how does that relate to how students try to find their target audience with NGT?
So I think the biggest issue is not assuming you know what your customer is, even if there's overlap with them and what and yourself. A lot with NGT comes down to a lot of the ideas we typically get are, well, I'm a student or I'm in a situation, and like, for example, college knowledge, right? You're like, how do I get into a good school? What do I do? You are definitely the target audience as being a high school student trying to get into college, but you're one voice out of many different types of customers or audiences within that. So I think the biggest pitfall I see this both with the companies that I work with as well as within the program, is having a false sense of knowing what your customer wants without doing due diligence of actually investigating and finding out and talking to your customer. A lot of companies are so embedded with their product and so involved with it that, like, well, I know what my customer wants because I know the product so well. But often your customers don't know what they want or don't know the product as well. And you can't assume they know as much as you do. I see that a lot with NGT, where students come in and say, well, I'm a student, I know my customer, I'm just gonna go ahead and design it for how I wanna have it. Yeah, but there's a lot of nuances with those types of audiences that you really have to go out and seek that information. The biggest way to do that through customer surveys. Surveying your customers, talking to your customers, but also not trying to lead them down a path of where you think they should go, but getting that honest feedback, and then designing the product for the problems that they're looking for you to solve.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, thinking back to just college knowledge and my experiences, right? So when we were trying to look at our target customer, we knew that it was going to be high schoolers because, well, we're the high schoolers and we're creating this for something we could use for ourselves. But I remember when we were creating it, you told us actually that we can't just look at it from the high schoolers' perspective because we're also going to have college students using our app, and the people who are paying for it are the colleges, and then the parents are going to be involved. So remembering that there's more aspects to it than you think or that you know of is something super important to really just look out for. And I remember when we were sending out our surveys, initially we were just going to send them to college students, but then you made us think in a different direction, like also send them to college students. So with high schoolers and college students both looking at it, we can get multiple perspectives to see how many people would really be using our app. And that was super valuable.
I have a quick follow-up on that one too. So it's a great call out. You'll often have multiple customers that you're aiming for, right? So you may have your core customer, but then you have, in your case, you were trying to connect high school students with college students in a non-formal way, right? So previously it was go through the admissions office, it's very formal, it's very selective. You were trying to get a more real-world experience and more advice from people that were actually in college for that. So you have two customers you're dealing with, your high school, but you also have to convince the college students to sign up. Then technically you have a third, because you also have to convince the colleges to allow you to work within their school to do that. So you often have your main customer, but you can also have secondary customers as well, or what we like to say in the program, stakeholders, right? So people that, yes, you're designing for your target customer, but you have to be aware and have to be able to design something that's also effective for your stakeholders, because they are almost like the keys to the city. Like they get you in. Without them, you don't get access to the college students. You get access to what your customers are really looking for.
Exactly. Yeah, I completely agree. So my next question, so how do you think students in the program can remain flexible throughout with their target audience as they update their product and as they revise and edit their product?
I'd say don't be so dead set on, don't be afraid to change your customer, right? We had a team last year, Shelf Sense, that was doing inventory for grocery stores. So that bit of you sign up at Instacart and they say, okay, if you can't find this, we'll have a replacement for you. Whole Foods does this too with their deliveries and Amazon. They're trying to solve that problem. They went initially from, we're going to target parents. Then they zoned in. Well, actually, we're going to target moms. And we're going to target working moms. So it's okay to evolve your customer. I see too many students that get hung up of no, it's got to be this and I got to focus on this. You need to be adaptable. This is the same thing with business as well too. You cannot be as rigid, and you have to be able to be flexible for it. And you have to understand where are your customers telling you that the biggest problem is. And through this program, the students are exposed through their customer surveys, but also through the mentors and even through our business analysts that come in who have new ideas and say, well, have you thought about this customer? Have you thought about this type of customer? And it gives them a lot of new ideas. The other trick, though, that you have is that often you can get pulled in multiple directions. I see too many students and teams that think, well, everyone's our customer. And it can be everybody. So there's a great online post, and we can throw it into the comment section for this, by Kevin Kelly. Kevin Kelly is the co-founder of Wired Magazine, and arguably one of the most interesting person in the world. This guy has done a crazy amount of stuff. he has a blog post. It's called 1,000 True Fans. And so he stresses the importance of you don't need to have mass reach to be successful in your business. All you really need, he argues, is 1,000 hardcore true fans that will be there for you and promote you and use your product. And so we actually share that article with the students in the program because I often hear, well, we could be for everybody. Well, if you're for everybody, then you're for nobody. You really are need to be focused in and understand who your core audience is. Because I've seen too many companies and too many teams do this where they become everything for everybody, and then it's not clear from the customer point of view of what are you actually really solving for. Because when you get that spread out, you lose your unique value proposition, you use your unique edge on what you can actually provide to your customer.
Yeah, and one thing I want to mention regarding like the program itself, I remember when we were going through, not only did our customer change, but our product changed a couple times too. So at first, students who are going through the program, right, when your product's changing, then you have to reevaluate who your customer is. And so something really important to just remember is when you're going through all those product changes, it can get really easy to just keep your customer the same and then try to like change your product around that, but you have to remember that what's at the core is your product. So even though it's easy to stick to one customer, you'll be better off trying to stay true to your product and really change your product in the best way possible, and then think about how am I going to change the customer to reflect that. And your customer will change a couple times at least. You'll go through like the process, and so really remembering that it's the product that you're focusing on and the customer has to surround your product. It's not the other way around. You're not creating things for a certain demographic.
It's a great point. I would even add to it though and say, focus on the problem you're solving for. Right? That's where I think a lot of students get thrown off, is that they have a cool idea for a product, but it's not really solving the right problem for their customer. And going back to really doing your research before you even introduce your product to your customer, through customer surveys or through the interviews you're doing, is talking about the problem. And if you can agree with a customer on, yes, this is really a problem for me, they're much more likely to accept your product once they realize it's a problem. Often what I see is students, they flip that and they start with, I have this great product that does this. But the customer's unclear what problem it's solving for. And if they're unclear what problem it's going to solve for, they're not going to be fully invested in the product. But if you start with the problem and you stress how bad it is, and your customer is saying, oh yes, that is awful, I can't stand that. Well, guess what? I got the product for you. It does this, and here's how it solves your problem. That's how we've seen the most success, where it's very clear, it's concise, but it starts with the problem statement. Often students will get so fancy into the features with their customers and think, oh, look at this cool feature this has, when they talk to the customers. They're not talking more about the problem they're trying to solve for.
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. So another question I have, how does market research influence your department's approach to reaching and engaging the right audience? So like within your company, but then how would you relate that to how can students at NGT do their proper research to help find them, like their target audience?
So it's a good question. It's a lot of going broad, and usually when you have a problem to solve for, you need to just do your analysis and send out your surveys on finding out the problem, right? Who's impacted by this problem? Who is it impacting the most? And that's really just kind of asking around. So we're not talking product. We're not talking about doing, how can I get better market share for this? You don't even know what problem you're really solving for first and who it's a problem for. So there's a lot of work that we do within the program of helping people define customer personas and understanding what exactly is, your type of customer. What are their behaviors? What do they model after? What do they focus on? That's not necessarily all focused on the problem, but it paints a more holistic view of the customer. So you better understand your customers so that when you're tailoring your solution to the problem they have, you're meeting more of their needs. The biggest issue I see that's all with the market research, where they come in and they just want to immediately just say, well, this is their problem, so we're going to solve it, but they don't really understand their full personas and understand what their customers actually do. It's also asking around a lot for different points of view. So when you're starting to pitch your idea, it's asking, well, who do you think else might be impacted by this? Like who else, what types of groups or what types of, whether it's by age, demographic, or what have you, who else might be impacted by this that you think is, could benefit from it? And that gives you a more holistic view of your demographics to then focus in on your market, right, and what you want to do. Another thing that I see a lot of clients do that I haven't seen students do, but I think would be a good idea for the students for next season is focus groups. So pulling in your target customers, right, and presenting the product, or presenting the problem, then presenting the product, and then collecting feedback in real time in a group setting to say, what do you think about this? And asking those tailored questions. It really comes down to the customer survey and the questions you ask. It'll be very, very important. You cannot have too many questions because people are not going to fill it out. They need to be relevant, but you also need to have a good combination of getting enough demographic information, but also understanding the problem that they have, and not being afraid to send out subsequent surveys. Don't think you always do it once. Most students, they have to cram everything into one survey. Companies survey their customers all the time. Through Net Promoter Scores, NPS, they're constantly doing it. And they're revising it. There's different outlets, different ways that they're surveying their customers. Through sweepstakes or through in-person events that they're doing. It's not just a one-time thing. And that's the biggest thing we're trying to teach these students is that don't just do one survey, do multiple surveys. Because your product's going to evolve over time, and your customer's going to evolve over time. So you need to be constantly collecting that feedback along the way to fine-tune your solution, your product.
Yeah, and I feel like I can relate to that with college knowledge last year. Going back to what you said about having a problem but not having like the right solution to it, right? So when we first started out, we knew that we wanted to do something related to college, right? Because like being in high school, that was our biggest like problem, like how do you get into college? So our initial idea was something that was really weird when I think back on it. It was like, I think it was like a software to help students keep track of activities for college, and then it also gave you like activity ideas. But I remember when we pitched this idea to the mentors and stuff, and you told us, you were like, that's a great idea. What's the problem you're solving? And is this actually solving the problem, or are you just trying to like put a band-aid on it, or are you actually solving it? And so then we really thought about it. We're like, well, is this a solution to what the students are facing, or do they need more information about college? What's their problem? Like, are they not able to find the information, or are they not finding the right sources for it? So then we realized that what we really need to focus on is getting students in high school a better source for information, which was the college students, and that's how we came up with college knowledge. But just like thinking back on that, I remember we sent out so many surveys to high schoolers. We sent out multiple surveys, so that is true. You're going to send out a lot. So we sent out a lot about, what do you look for in a college app? There's so many apps on the internet. What do you want? What do you think would help you? And so then going through those surveys are really what made us realize that organizing activities isn't the problem. It's how do you get there? Like, who do you talk to get this information? And so I thought back to our experience there, and I really wanted to touch on that this is an experience that every single group is going to go through during the program. And it's important to be flexible with your idea. You can't just be stuck to your product. You have to be willing to have it grow and expand based on what you think actually solves the problem.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And you also surveyed colleges, right? You admin, administrative folks, people that were in career services. Then you started surveying college students, right? And getting that as well. I mean, we've seen it that a great example of the winning team last year, New to Fit. They went in and theirs was a generative AI. It was an AI form checker. So we check your form in the gym to make sure you're doing your bicep curl correctly. And they were very much focused on gyms. Well, during the final pitch, and even after the final pitch, we actually pivoted their customer. The customers were still gym goers, and that was still a valuable need. But we found a more pressing need in the physical therapy space. So think about it, if you get injured, or if you have to go into the hospital to get physical therapy, you get phenomenal care in most cases. And my heart goes out to all the physical therapists for all they do. The biggest problem though is that once they come home and they have a list of exercises they need to do, they don't have that physical therapist there to make sure that they're still doing those stretches or doing those exercises correctly. That's where New to Fit fills that need, solves that problem of we can make sure you're doing the exercise correctly as the physical therapist has required you to do it, and we can send that information back to the physical therapist so they can be able to check in on you before your next session. That didn't come out to the very end of the program. And that, I think, is a stronger customer, a stronger use case than even the gyms, which is already somewhat a very saturated market. But it's just, you never know where these new applications come from where your customer base is, and how your product can evolve from that. And we're even taking it a step further with New to Fit. This year, we're partnering with Wawa Ability, and we're having the students focus their solutions on helping those with disabilities. New to Fit can also play in that space as well, too. Same way as form checkers, of helping those with disabilities, having that correct form. So it's taking it down to a third type of customer they have. And that's the beauty of it, is that it can evolve and it can grow as well over time.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of wild how, your product can change so drastically by the end of the program. But I guess that just goes to show how NGT is so influential towards the students and, for them, and helping them, just keep on growing. Even though the program's over, New to Fit's still doing all this crazy stuff, which is super cool. But another question I had for you is, have there been any moments where you had to reevaluate or shift target audience based on performance metrics or market trends?
Yeah, it happens a lot where you typically have an hypothesis of what you want to be able to send out to your customers. And then through response to marketing materials, you realize it's not the right fit. You're not getting the conversions you want, you're not getting the response rate, you're not getting the sale that you want to be able to get. And I think the best companies that do it well, first off, I think they do more testing. So they test different markets, so they test different areas and different types of customers at once, and do targeted messaging for them, versus putting it all into one package. And it's also what I think students need to do as well too. There's a really good book by an author, Jim Collins. Jim Collins has studied some of the best companies in the world. He has a couple of books, Good to Great, Great by Choice. I think this one's from Great by Choice, one of the books. But he has this analogy he uses of firing bullets over cannonballs. And it's about, this is on the open seas back in the day when they had, this is before aircraft carriers and 1800s, and you had the pirates and the ships and everything. Cannons were very expensive, and cannonballs were very expensive, so you wouldn't just line up for another ship and just immediately try to fire a cannonball, because you needed time to be able to hone in and get the trajectory right to be able to get a hit. So what they do instead is they fire bullets and say, okay, what direction is it in, what it is, and bullets are a lot cheaper. They fire those, narrow in and zone in on where they're going to fire, and then when they were ready and they said, okay, we've got the right trajectory, we know what the winds are like, we know everything's set up, let's fire the cannonball, and you're more likely to get a direct hit. You can take that same analogy and you can apply it to how you're evaluating your customers and how you're really learning about your customers. So instead of putting all of your marketing revenue and your funds and all that into one marketing campaign or one survey, for example, you want to spread that out and you want to fire more bullets and see where is their traction or who's really picking this up. And then from that, once you figure out which ones are really sticking, then you double down, then you fire your cannons. And then you say, okay, we're going to really double down and invest in this because this is really resonating with this customer base. But my recommendation is always start wide, start broad, right? And don't eliminate anything off the table, and then fire those bullets, those small experiments, then start drilling it back down, and that's where you want to double down into your cannonballs.
So yeah, I feel like a way we can kind of tie this into incoming students, right, is when you might have an idea, or you might have a certain goal or a topic that you want to focus on, but don't be so set on the product. Don't be so set on exactly what you want to do or what problem you might even want to solve. It's good to stay broad, and it's good to have a broad perspective on this, right, in the beginning, because there's so many different applications of something. Like with New to Fit, they found they decided that physical therapy was a better market for them. So it's good to stay broad with it and just really be open to things. And I think being open-minded is a really important topic when it comes to being like with your target audience, because it's important to stay flexible, and it's important to be prepared to change your product, change your audience at any given time, because it's more important to maximize what you can with your product than just to stick to whatever you had before. So I think that's an important thing for incoming students into the program to really think about, that don't be too dead set on what you're doing, stay flexible and be open-minded. Yeah, so another question I have, or your final question, is what advice do you have for teams who are trying to improve their understanding of their audience and redefine their targeting strategies?
I mean, it goes back to a lot we've already talked about, but you need to be a asking machine, okay? You need to be as broad, and you need to get as much information as possible. It goes back to the surveys. Often we see students, the ones that don't do as successful are the ones that get 10, 15, 20 responses. The ones that are more successful are getting more of like 100, 200 responses. And they're getting it from their target audiences. And it's not just like, I'm going to send this online, expect everyone to get it. They're out there. They're talking to their customers. They're talking to potential customers constantly. That's where I see the successful students and companies when out there, is that they're highly tuned to who their customer is. And they can talk about the customer as if they are the customer. Right? They know their needs, they know their wants, they know what they like, what they don't like. Because they've done the research and they've talked about to them and listened to what they have. I think the risk that a lot of students have is that they want to push the product and the idea, the tech. We are a tech-focused program, but what Robin likes to say, we're not tech for tech's sake, but we're human-centered design. We're tech with a purpose. And I truly believe in that, is that we're trying to solve real-world problems. In order to do that, you have to listen to your customer. Have to know what they want, have to know what their needs are, and be able to adjust. And a lot of times the customers don't always know exactly what they want. They know it's not working, but they may not have the solution to be able to solve for it. That's another risk I see too, is students just taking what their customer is saying is they think there is the solution, right? But I'll tell you, Uber is a great example. I never would have thought of Uber in a million years, but I also love the fact that it exists and it solves a problem for me that I didn't know I even had, right? But I'd be afraid if they tried to crowdsource that solution, you wouldn't have Uber and it wouldn't be as efficient and as good as it is. Right? So it's a matter of collecting information from your customer, understand the problem, and then from there, you can then solution it out. And at the end of the day, customers aren't going to care how you solve it, as long as it's being solved and it's done efficiently and it's done at a good rate, right? But I'd be careful about taking initial feedback from customers on how to solve the problem. It's more of starting with more of understanding what the problem is, what their problems are, understanding the customer more, and not jumping straight to product features and saying, well, we have this cool feature that we have. It's not going to make a lot of sense to a customer, or it's not going to help them solve the problems if you're not listening and really absorbing that information off the bat. So that's my biggest advice for students, is be patient, take the time to fully understand. And when you think you understand, you don't. Do it again and keep going. And that's what the mentors in the program helps you do, is we help build the scaffolding for you, but it's your responsibility to go out and do it. We're not going to do the surveys for you. We're not, half the time, and oftentimes this is happening with our group, right? Where you guys are asking me a question of well, what should we do here for the customer? And I said, guys, I'm not your target customer. You're talking to the wrong person. I went to college a long time ago, so I'm not. We need to go talk to college students, or we need to go talk to high school students and find out, or colleges. So it's really making sure that you can have smart people around you, but if they're not really your target customers, then be careful about what they say. Go to the source. Always go to the source.
Well, thank you. That was very impactful, and I hope students who are listening to this for the next cohort or for cohorts in the future really get a lot of insight on how they can maximize their target audience. So thank you.
thanks for having me. Thank you, Tara, as well, for this beautiful space. And I think we'll probably go horseback riding tomorrow or something as well, too. But thanks for having me on, and really excited for the next season as well.
Yeah, of course. So with the NGT 360 season starting next month, we will begin documenting the journeys of our competitors and we'll track their progress up until their final pitch. Stay tuned with our podcast to see the amazing ideas these kids come up with and how they take a simple idea and transform it into a business. Thanks for listening and stay tuned for next month's episode of Teen Innovators powered by NGT 360.
You got me loser, set me free.